Hello, everyone. Welcome to Therapist Connect broadcasts. So I'm Kaz Binstead, co-lead at Therapist Connect, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Peter Blundell, and we've also got Lily Rose here today. She's yeah, she's still a little bit sleepy. She's like me; she doesn't like mornings. How are you, Pete?
I'm good, actually. I'm good. I'm just been reflecting on such a busy week, so much going on this week, yeah, just it's really lovely. I think it's gone really well, and I'm just feeling quite positive about the last couple of events that we've got on today. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited. I was up quite late last night, but I was thinking about poetry and kind of in poetry, and yeah, and then I got up this morning and I was still excited, which is really unlike me in the morning. So I'm really looking forward to that event later. Our poetry event, for anyone who doesn't know. Oh, someone's saying good morning to us. Morning, Liz. That's one of our team members. For anyone who doesn't know, our poetry event is our finale this week. Such a nice event to kind of end on, I think, for a lot of different reasons. And for me personally, obviously, Peter and I have together organised this whole week. We've got a team of volunteers that's helped us immensely. But I suppose all of the organisation and the inspiration and everything like that has been me and Peter. And we've also appeared quite a lot this week. Thank you, Lily Rose. Don't bark. Just don't bark when we're on screen. She actually heard me. But yeah, we've been on screen a lot this week, so it's been quite exhausting at times. So for me personally, I feel really happy to be ending on poetry, which is one of my favourite things. So yeah, so that's at 1 o'clock. So anyone who wants to book on, we've got quite a few people coming, but if anyone does want to book on, you can find it, find the link.
And we're not broadcasting that event, okay? So we do have another broadcast this morning, but that will be our final. We'll talk about that in a moment, but that'll be our final broadcast. And then the poetry event you do need to book on. And I think on the schedule it says we were going to do like a closing ceremony, but we won't be doing any further broadcasts today. We're just going to be ending the week in the poetry showcase. So
yeah, so please do come along. So you'll find that link on social media or on our website. You can see our website at the bottom scrolling there. So if you do want to book on, find that link, and we'll look forward to seeing you. So I'm running that with Vic Leeson, who is a member of the Therapist Connect community. Has been right from the beginning, really. I found her little message that she sent in January of 2020, and she's a poet, and so we're really pleased to be co-curating. Well, I'm pleased to be co-curating this event with Vic, we're going to be doing a poetry showcase, and then that will be followed by a poetry workshop, which we'll both lead, and encouraging anyone to come along to that. Sometimes people want to come along to that kind of stuff and they feel a little bit nervous, like, am I going to be picked on to read or something like that? So just to reassure people, sharing is optional, and it's for all levels. It really is for beginners level as well. So if you are interested in finding out how you might go about starting to write poetry, that workshop might be something of interest to you.
It's going to be really great. I've not really been involved this much in the poetry event, and Vic and Kaz have been organising all of that, but I have seen a couple of the poems which are absolutely amazing, and the submissions that you got. I know they were just such a high standard, weren't they, of people who kind of submitted poetry, and we had so many people respond actually. So it's going to be a brilliant way to end the week. I just wanted to mention, I wanted to say hello to our friends in the Counsellors Staff Room Facebook group who were broadcasting live into there today. And then the other thing I wanted to mention as well is our social media details are running across the screen right now, so that they've been doing that all week. But I know that there's a few people this week who have come to events and said, oh, they've literally only just heard about Therapist Connect this week. Some people saying, oh, I'm not on social media. So there are social media details. You can follow us, you can subscribe to us on YouTube. But if you aren't on social media and you don't have some of those things, you can sign up to our newsletter. And there is a subscription page on our website. So if you go to our website, sign up to that, and then you can get regular updates about what we're doing, and keep informed if you're not on some of those social media platforms, because we want to make sure that we're including everybody in and updating everybody. So I'd said hello to the councillor's staff room. So Zena, who runs the councillor's staff room, is saying hello, both from her and her daughter Zara.
And Zara has a favourite person in Therapist Connect. You know, don't know who that is. Zara, I'm waiting to you. Yeah, I mean, so much love and thanks to Zena and Councillor's Staff Room. What an amazing Facebook group as well. I was hearing from Zena all about how they got set up and her own kind of journey in that. So do check them out. We're so grateful for them hosting us on Facebook. We haven't quite got our head round Facebook yet, have we, Peter?
No, I think we're developing on different platforms, aren't we? Twitter is our main platform, but we've started to venture out into other things. So we're just still working our way through that and trying to figure out how to best use it for our community. So yeah. Also, just for Zena's been really involved all week. Actually, she's come to loads of different events as well as supporting us with the broadcast. And she was on the debate that we had on Monday, which was around therapists and social media. Which there was lots of different people on that debate talking about how we engage with social media as therapists, and I think there was some really interesting discussions that came up from that. So that's on our YouTube channel if anybody didn't catch that on Monday.
Yeah, really, I really enjoyed watching that back. That was one of my favorite ones to watch back, actually. Such a great panel. Yeah, I'm echoing Peter. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's come to our events. We know that it's been a very tricky week, only 1 week really into 2021, and you know, already at the start of the week, obviously, the news about lockdown and changes with schools, and so which obviously impacts on people with childcare and things like that, and so many things that I think come up for people. So we really appreciate that it's been not necessarily an easy week for folk. We hope that this week of events has in some way helped people a little bit, or maybe just given a little bit of I don't know, light relief or whatever. Well, you know, we've had some heavy things as well, but yeah, thank you to everyone who has come along. And you know, for many people, you may just want to watch some of the recorded ones on YouTube. Yes, there's things like the poetry today that you know, it isn't being broadcast out today, but you know, there's plenty of other events on YouTube. So yeah, do feel free to kind of catch up and keep in touch. It's been really nice, people kind of coming that we don't know. It's been lovely, first of all, putting faces to the names, to the Twitter names that we do know, but it's also been nice to meet people that we don't know. Lots of people, as Peter said, they're saying that they don't know, they've never been to a Therapist Connect thing before. We've not actually done that many kind of things, but you know, for people who don't know us, yes, stay connected. This is what it's all about. And obviously Peter explained all the ways you can, so just encouraging you to do that. I think now might be a good time for me to read that little thing that we've got. So I'm going to read this. So this is something that I wrote, and I'm in the poetry showcase later. I'm presenting one, what I would call a proper poem, which is more like more indicative of what my poetry style is. But I'm also going to present this one as well, but I'm going to present it here for the benefit of the people who aren't coming to the poetry. And this is something that I wrote. I wrote it before Christmas about Therapist Connect, But my plan was that we would have this great video project where lots of people would kind of read it out, and we would mix people together, kind of a mash, that type of thing. And unfortunately, just due to personal circumstances, things that were going on in my life that were unavoidable, I was a little bit late in sending it out to people. So we had many thanks to all the people who were really excited about being involved in the video project. And I completely own that. Well, it wasn't really my fault. There was reasons that I couldn't get that out in time, but I did send it just before Christmas. Some people did record, and we have used at least one of those recordings in our networking event. You never know, it might come to something at some point. Maybe second birthday we can have a crack at recording it. But I'm going to just read it out now. So this is almost summing up of what Therapists Connect means, what Therapists Connect is, for anyone, particularly new people, but also just to inform our year going forward. So, happy birthday, Therapists Connect, our community of therapists born in January of 2020. Little did we know what that year would hold. Connecting across the globe, our worldwide community is about seeing each other in who we are, as people, as therapists. A place to share resources, thoughts, projects, musings. A place to chat, discuss, debate. To support, laugh, cry. To ride the sometime agony of 2020. It's where we appreciate the work we do for ourselves, for our clients and future clients. And a place to hold up and honour our profession and all who make it. We listen to our similarities and we listen to our differences of opinion. We recognise difference in people and stand for inclusivity and respect. Connection in our profession and connection through humanity. We tag, we tweet, we connect, we connect. We connect. So happy birthday, Therapists Connect. Happy birthday to us. Thank you. Well, I hope people enjoyed that.
Just a little comment there. Truly moving.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah. That was lovely, Kaz. Thank you for writing that. And also, I know it was a shame that we didn't get to do that video project with that, but it's lovely that we can share it here. And I think we're going to share it again in the poetry event later as well, aren't we? So that was beautiful. Thank you. And just on that sense of community, there's just a couple of people, I think, rather than people, just comments I wanted to make about some of the people who've attended this week over the course of the week. We had 55, I think, we counted in the end, therapists who've contributed to the events this week, either running a workshop, recording something for a workshop, delivering something, which is absolutely amazing across the course of the week. I tried to kind of count up how many attendees we'd had, but it's really quite difficult. But I think we've had about 500 people, I think, across all the different workshops and everything, which doesn't include the people that have been watching on YouTube and all of that kind of stuff. So that's just been absolutely phenomenal. We have had so many different people from across the world who've joined us, which is fantastic. And we encourage everybody to kind of reach out to us really and foster those connections further throughout 2021. I also wanted to give a shout out to all the students who have engaged with us over the course of the week. And we've also had some people come to some of the workshops who haven't started their training yet. So there was a few people who maybe are starting their courses in like a few months' time, or they're kind of looking forward ahead, maybe to next year, where they're going to start their counselling or therapist training. But they've come along to kind of get ahead of the game, really, to find out what's going on within the profession, and kind of the different debates and issues that they might need to be aware of, which I just think for students, that's absolutely fantastic. And you are very, very welcome in our community. And you know, thank you for coming along. So it's, I mean, gosh, talk about diversity. We've had such an array of different therapists who've come over the course of this week. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, it's amazing statistics. And you know, well done you, as if you're not busy enough anyway. He's there totting up statistics, but you know, it's just so wonderful to have so many people involved. So the other thing that we have today, we have one other event, is it?
Yes, so we've got the one that's coming on at 11 o'clock is our final debate of the week, a final broadcast actually of the week, which is something I'm quite passionate about actually, and it's about therapists who are qualified as a therapist, but also in some other profession. It could be any profession, you know, it could be nurse, teacher, social worker, lawyer, whatever it is, but who are trying to kind of manage both of those roles. As most people know, I'm also a social worker as well as a therapist. And I think some specific issues can come up when you are qualified in both professions, particularly if you're working in the two at the same time. So that debate, there is 5 of us on that debate, which was a really nice debate to have. I think it lasts about an hour, including Dr. Andrew Reeves is on there as well, who is a therapist, obviously, but he's also a social worker as well. One of the things that's come from that debate, I'd mentioned about my interest in dual professions in an article in Therapy Today. It was a very brief sentence, I think, one line. And when that article went out, I've actually been contacted by lots of different therapists who are qualified as therapists and in another profession to say that they have difficulties and challenges and they don't really know where to access that support. So one of the things that we're launching from Therapist Connect is a regular support group for people who are dual qualified, who might want to get together and talk about some of those issues that come up. So all those people who've contacted me, I'll be emailing them to kind of let them know about that. And anyone who's interested, that is going to be like an open event for anyone who wants to come along, and we'll see what we can do with that space and how we can best support each other.
It sounds really great. And I think this is the thing, isn't it? And I guess it's the thing about community. There are often so many people who have I don't know, like you say, a therapist who might be dual qualified and doesn't feel very supported in that, but doesn't know who the other people are who may also be dual qualified. And I think this is the real importance of community, actually, that people come together, people find out more about each other. And we're hoping through our new video series, Therapists Connecting, which we had our first video out on Wednesday. Louise Tyler, one of our community therapists, recorded a video for us. But we hope that is an extension of our original tweets, which obviously was all about asking people to introduce themselves. It just gives people a little bit more time, I think, to be able to really say who they are, where they practice, and all of that jazz. So yeah.
I think one of the things that's resonated with me a lot, actually, I say this week, but actually, we had an activism workshop yesterday, and there was lots of different presenters, and they were all absolutely fantastic. But one of them, Myra Khan, was presenting in that workshop and spoke about a lot about the spaces that we create as therapists and the spaces that we use. And I think one of the things that's kind of come out of that for me is this idea of hopefully Therapist Connect can be creating some of these safe and supportive spaces where we can connect with each other. Now, sometimes that might be on Twitter, and our discussions on there might be our trainee talk discussions that we have. But I think going forward over 2021, we're also going to try and create some of these kind of contained virtual spaces where we can kind of come together and talk about different topics. We're going to have some networking events, and we're also going to have some book groups as well, which we might not have time to go into full detail here, but they'll be up on our website, and hopefully we can try and foster some of those spaces for connection and activism and community, which I think is obviously it's key themes that we've had from this conference anyway.
Definitely. All right, well, probably not got much else to say, have we?
No, I think that's everything.
Say thank you to Peter again. It's such a pleasure working with Peter. I think it's going to take us about a week to kind of process exactly what has gone on this week. But I just love having someone that I work very closely with. We're very kind of similar in our style of working, as I've said previously, but also we're quite tuned in with each other. We can be quite open and honest with each other about where we're at, and that really helps me I guess on a busy week like this, like make sure that I'm staying grounded, processing my emotions, being with exactly what's there. So yeah, thank you, and high five, right?
Absolutely, and thank you, Kaz. There's so much work that goes on behind the scenes, and you do so much, and it's not always seen. So thank you very much for being such a good friend and colleague. Thanks to everybody who's been involved, all our volunteers and everyone who's attended this week. It's a lovely way to kind of end the week.
It is, absolutely. Okay, well, enjoy the day, and I'll see some of you at Poetry later.
Yeah, goodbye, everyone. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to this Therapist Connect broadcast. For those of you who don't know, my name is Peter Blundell and I co-run Therapist Connect with Kaz Binstead. Just a little bit about Therapist Connect. So we're an open community of therapists from across the world, and we're about bringing people together to discuss and debate and talk about anything to do with therapy. You might have accessed some of our birthday events already this week, and we have some others which you can find out on our website. Today's discussion is about being having dual professions, so being a therapist and also being qualified in another profession. So I'm a person-centered therapist and I lecture on the MA programme in person-centered therapy at Liverpool John Moores University, but I'm also a registered social worker. I previously worked in teams that work with children and families with children with disabilities. We know that counselling is often a second profession, which people come to after maybe having a career somewhere else. So I've really been interested in what that's like for people who have that dual status. So all our panelists today have been brought together because they are a therapist, but also qualified in another profession. So we're going to discuss some of the potential themes, difficulties and challenges that might come up around that dual professional identity. So let me introduce our panelists today. I'm delighted to have Dr. Andrew Reeves on the panel. Andrew is an associate professor in the counselling professions and mental health, and obviously a previous chair of the BACP. Andrew has been practicing for 31 years as a social worker and 29 years as a therapist. As a social worker, he worked in child protection with children and families, with vulnerable adults and in statutory adult mental health settings in crisis work. And as a therapist, he's worked in statutory mental health settings as well as in higher education. And he's supervised social workers and therapists for many years across a full range of practice settings. So thank you for coming to the panel today. We also have Lynn Findlay. Lynn is a counsellor and psychotherapist in private practice with adults and young people and a qualified social worker. Lynn has been working as a social worker since the late 1990s in a variety of statutory teams and fostering agencies, but she has recently just moved into independent social work alongside her counselling practice. We have Kieran Hurley. Kieran started a career in adult nursing in 1991, gaining a diploma from Lancaster University in 1994. He worked in critical care and surgical settings before becoming a lecturer in 2005. He began a diploma in counselling and psychotherapy in 2016 and is now a private practitioner in Sheffield, South Yorkshire, and specialises in work with children and young people and with clients who identify as LGBTQ+. Last but not least, we have Louise Thomas Critchley. Louise is currently working as an assistant head of sixth form in an 11 to 18 secondary school for 4 days a week. She combines this with her role as a psychotherapist working in a counselling agency. Louise has taught for 29 years, working as head of English and psychology during this time. And Louise's pastoral role in education inspired her to train as a psychotherapist in 2017, where she's just completed her MA in counselling and psychotherapy. Louise completed her research dissertation on teachers' lived experiences of mental health provision in secondary schools. I think she's going to talk a little bit about that today. Louise has also recently started a small pilot study in her local authority, introducing monthly supervision to newly qualified teachers. So thank you, everybody. It's a lovely panel, lots of different experiences in there, so I'm really interested to hear about that. I thought for our first question today, it might be interesting to talk a little bit about how you became to become dual qualified. So how did you become to be a therapist and your other profession? Louise, could we come to you first? Is that okay?
Okay. So my sort of shift in career and my change came when I started working with the 16 to 18 age group, and I started in a new position in Sefton. What concerned me at the time was, I don't know why, but the 16 to 18-year-old child or adolescent brings with it a whole range of pastoral issues that I'd not come across to that extreme before. And what astounded me was there was just such a lack of provision for mental health for that particular group. And so we're talking now, this was 8-9 years ago. And I found myself just working ad hoc counselling. You know, I'd done pastoral role for many years. So I started training at John Moores, and alongside that, I've continued my role as assistant head of sixth form. And that has allowed me to see the gap in provision still, not just in the 16 to 18, but obviously lower years. And we're currently going through quite a period of change with the government white paper. But there's still, in my view, a huge gap there, training for teachers, supervision for teachers. So I qualified 18 months ago. And I then went to work in the Star Centre in Bootle, where fabulous place where a lot of learning. I, learned a lot about dealing with child mental health, the provision again in the Sefton area, and I continue to work with young people as well as in private practice now. Still, as I say, as we'll probably talk about this morning, foot in both camps. It has its complexities. But I feel like I've benefited, and certainly my students and the school that I work in have benefited from that training.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, I think we'll come to that at some point, that idea of whether we continue in both roles or whether we kind of end up drifting maybe towards one or the other. So thank you. Who'd like to go next? Kieran? Yeah?
Yeah. I did nursing placements at Zackley and Walton Hospitals, Louise.
Oh, right. Oh,
just down the road from you.
Yeah, not far from me.
Yeah. Which is why I kind of jumped in to go next. Yeah. Bit of a segue there. Yeah. So the decision to switch for me, and it has been a switch. So I'm no longer a registered nurse because I was due to register in September, re-register in September this year, and I didn't have enough practice hours as a nurse to honestly say that, I've done the practice required to maintain my skills. So I had to let my registration lapse. And when I noticed that was going to be the case, I thought, I wonder what that's going to be like. And I think my identity has shifted so completely now from nurse to therapist that it was barely a blip, really. I just noticed it as a fact and didn't really have much of a reaction to it, which was a relief. I enjoyed that element of it. But the transition was really interesting because mine was a almost an existential crisis of identity, where I didn't feel like working as a lecturer in nursing would allow me to kind of live out my values. I was finding I was making lots of compromises and not really kind of, doing what I knew to be the right thing. I was kind of doing what I was asked to do by universities are now very marketized. You know, they operate on a very business model structure, and having been a nurse for 20 odd years, by the time I was making the transition, I was thinking, I don't like this. It doesn't sit well with me. But when I look around me, it seems to be working for most other people in my department, or that they're making it work. So it was pretty obvious that I was the anomaly, and for various reasons, I didn't feel able or equipped or safe even to kind of campaign or make any changes or argue for my case at work or more nationally. I've been planning to do therapist training as a kind of second career for a while, and just the time was right to do it in 2016 for a range of reasons, and I went with it. And it was really interesting, kind of coming from a profession that is regulated on a statutory basis. You can't call yourself a nurse unless you're registered. Same with social worker and lots of other professions. Into one that has the regulatory bodies exist, the standards exist, but they're not statutory, they're not mandated. So exploring the differences in that for me was really interesting. And I don't know if everyone else knows, but Lynn and I trained in the same class in the same institution. And because Lynn's also a social worker, we had this really interesting, because we were the only two other registered professionals, and we had this really interesting dynamic between kind of the two of us, some of the tutors and colleagues in the class, and feeling that identity shift kind of quite slowly for me. But I can remember the inflection point when it tipped. Was really clear to me. But the development of that identity shift was really slow. No, I was a nurse and a therapist for a long time, a number of years. Yeah.
Thanks, Kieran.
That's me.
That's really interesting. We might come on a little bit more later about kind of moving away from kind of one profession and kind of sticking with one. Lynn, do you want to tell us a little bit about your?
Yeah, well, if I'm going to go right back to my first degree at uni, which was psychology, I always wanted to be a counsellor or a clinical psychologist, but I got told, no, you're too young, you can't be a counsellor at 21, you need to go get some real life experience before you go into counselling. And I spent a few years after my first degree not really sure what it was I wanted to do. Did some helpline work, did some volunteering, I did out in research, worked with young people, and then I thought, no, I think I might go for social work. And I qualified as a social worker in the late 90s. And I've really I'm the type of person I get stuck easily, and I noticed that about myself since doing counselling training. So in the past 20 years, I've only had 2 employers, which makes my CV look and job application quite easy. So I did, I did 10 years, almost 10 years with Sheffield Local Authority as a frontline social worker in a variety of teams, statutory services, children with disabilities team, looked after children's team. And then I moved to work for an independent fostering agency. And I left there in April this year. But obviously, like Kieran said, Kieran and I trained together and decided, obviously, about 4 or 5 years ago, I think I want to pursue another career now. It was time to make that shift. And the time was right for me, and started the counselling training in 2016, but never made that shift. It took me quite a while to get that mindset that I can work in both ways. And it wasn't until this time last year when I decided to leave my job that I've been in 13 years and actually hand my notice in with nowhere else to go, and think, okay, I need to move from this stuckness and make a shift and work out who I am and what I want to do. Obviously, I'd qualified as a therapist. I was working actually at Sheffield IAPT. So I was working for the NHS on their post-qualifying scheme, and then got taken on as a paid employee at Sheffield IAPT. Sadly, I wasn't able to stay on because of regulations in Public Health England, and that's such a shame. So I did really like that work. But this year has been a real year of exploration for me. I decided I wanted to work independently as a therapist and independently as a social worker, but I thought to do that I need to go back to frontline social work. So I've been back to Sheffield Local Authority this year for 7 months, back doing child protection investigations and frontline work. Probably wasn't the best year with hindsight to pick to make that change, but when I decided to hand my notice in this time last year, and I left my main job on the 25th of March, we didn't know what the world was going to be like. So this year has been a real shift for me. So I've gone back to frontline social work. I've set up my counselling private practice. I've left IAPT. So I've had this move between being regulated and like what Kieran said, being free. So most of this year I've had 2 employers which have been the most regulated employers that I could have, local authority and the NHS. Yeah. And now I'm completely independent. I'm an independent social worker and a counselling private practice. And I think I needed that. I don't think I could have done one job statutory or regulated or booking annual leave or all the stuff that goes with it alongside one where I've got that clinical judgment and professional freedom. So yeah, so that's where I am right now.
And it's a massive change for you this year, Lynn, isn't it? Going from those kind of organised settings to completely independent. So yeah, wow, what a lot to happen this year. Andrew, what about yourself? I think you were a social worker first, weren't you?
Well, yeah, I mean, listening to you, Lynn, there's real similarities. So I always wanted to be a counsellor, but I didn't know that that's what it was called. Because, I mean, we're going back to the kind of mid-80s then, and I mean, counselling was around, obviously, but not in the way it is now. So I knew I wanted to do that, and I thought it was social work. That's what you did to be a counsellor. So, you know, it wasn't very thought through. I trained as a Samaritans volunteer when I was 18 and kind of enjoyed that, and was doing a degree in psychology, which I absolutely hated. So I left after the first year because it was just a waste of my life, really, to sit there looking at turn alternation and woodlice and nonsense like that. And so I left my degree in psychology and never finished it, and went and wanted real life experience. I went and worked as a healthcare assistant with older people with dementia for 2 years, and that's kind of how I went in social. I was kind of duped, really, because my social work training was really good, but it was before kind of community care and the kind of purchase of provider split in the early 90s. And so I did a very traditional psychodynamic casework social work training. And I thought, you know, so we did lots of family therapy stuff, and I thought that's what social work was going to be like. Then, of course, I got my job. And so I was initially in an intake team, but then because nobody wanted to do child protection, so I ended up doing child protection. So I was a child protection social worker doing investigations, and also I'd done my approved training under the Mental Health Act. So I was either going out doing Mental Health Act assessments or doing child protection. I thought, well, I might police, really. The police would have been a more upfront way. So I felt like it was social police things. So I was either threatening to take people's children away or put them in hospital. And I really enjoyed the work, and you know, I then kind of moved away from child protection into a crisis team, mental health crisis team, where we did therapy. But very, very early on, I realised that social work wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. So I started my counsellor training and went through, and my first training was a person-centred counselling program. And to be honest, the reason why I went full-time into therapy is because I was working 12.5-hour shifts in a mental health crisis team, exhausted. We had young children. I was never seeing them. And then a job came up as a university counsellor in Liverpool. And even though I was at the top of the social work scale, I mean, this is going to make me sound very superficial, but even though I was at the top of the social work scale, this job at Liverpool meant, even as a counsellor, that I was going to get an £8,000 salary increase. I was no longer going to have statutory responsibility for everything that I did. And so all that really intense pressure was taken off me. Plus, I got 10 more days annual leave, and it's like, what's not to like? Really? So that's I then started working full time as a counsellor and really enjoyed it. And the complexity of work was the same. And there's no difference between my counselling work and my social work in terms of the level of risk and the level of challenge that was coming through. But of course, I wasn't holding statutory responsibility anymore. So I kind of always knew I wanted to be a counsellor, but found my way into social work. And I know we're going to move on to our ongoing relationship between the two, which has ebbed and flowed for me. But I see my primary identity as a counsellor, but actually I've never been able to let social work go. It's always been really important to me.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really interesting, because I was just thinking about my own route into therapy and social work, and I trained as a counsellor first and really absolutely loved it, but actually once I qualified, I didn't feel that there was enough employment opportunities out there, and was kind of worried about that, and decided actually I'm going to go and train to be a social worker, as I thought the employment opportunities were going to be better, and they were, I think, actually. But whilst I enjoyed that role, working with children with disabilities, I always felt like I was a therapist, and I always felt like that was something that I was kind of going to return to and kind of make my full-time kind of career at some point. And so for me, a bit like you, Andrew, I've kind of gone in and out, been a therapist and then kind of done social work. But I feel like now I've got to a point where I'm kind of having to make that decision about what am I, and struggling to kind of do all of those things. And I think now as well, because I teach at a university, in some ways I almost feel like I've got 3 professional identities. There's like a teacher, a therapist, and a social worker. And sometimes that's quite, and Kieran might have had this when he was lecturing as well, like kind of how do you like manage all of that in your mind? Like, who are you on what particular day? And I think that can be quite challenging, I think. If we move on to like our next question, which is, we've talked a little bit about this really, of some of the challenges that maybe people have faced being dual qualified, and kind of how they manifest themselves in our different roles. Is there anyone who wants to jump in immediately around that?
Yeah, I'll start. The really big thing for me when I was doing the counselling training, I think as Kieran will testify, was who am I? You know, what is my identity? When I introduce myself to someone and they say, what do you do? It was always, I am a social worker. And like Andrew was saying, I really was struggling to let that go. But at the same time, I was struggling with the power and the judgment, the analysis that came with social work, moving into a, relational counselling training. And I think that challenge then of working out who you are and whether you've got, like you said, do you have to pick? And I think for the 3 years during the training, I thought I did. And I thought I was on a journey of, and I do hate that word, actually, sorry. Kieran will smile at me, so I just used to hate that word, journey. But I did think I was actually having to make a choice. And now I think that was because of being employed. And now I'm sort of me, and my brand, I suppose, our company is me, is Lynn Finlay, and I'm a therapist and I am a social worker. And for me now, it's me, the both parts of me. And I'm hoping that not having a link or a tie to local government or an employee, I can balance that out.
Yeah, I totally identify with you there, Lynn, and what all of you have said, really, and it's music to my ears, because you think you're quite on your own, having a personal identity crisis of what am I today. And Peter and I were talking about this before we started recording, that because the nature of our role, we tend to do part-time roles, so many days. I do 4 days as an educator, and then I do 1.5 days as a psychotherapist. And yet when I meet somebody, it's that, what am I? And when I introduce myself to my clients, do I confess that I have another life and another role, in case I bump into you in Sainsbury's one day and here I am with 2 heads on. So I think you are constantly aware of that, but when you can actually settle yourself with, this is who I am and these are the services that I offer, it does give you a bit of inner peace that you can sort of pull, that this is, you've got two strings to your bow rather than just one. And I'm quite happy with that now, but I haven't been for a while.
I feel maybe there's something about the social work training and my counselling training, and I enjoyed them both, and they were both very good, but were neither sufficient in of themselves. And that for me, the social work training never really quite looked at the relational part in the way that I really wanted to. And once we did what was kind of a version of kind of person-centered training on the social work program, it wasn't. It was a basic skills type stuff. And yet my counsellor training, which I really, really enjoyed and got loads out of, I thought was insufficient because it was very good at the relational, but it didn't help me think as a therapist systemically. I'd see my client in the room, but my counsellor training hasn't helped me think beyond the room. And there was nothing around sociology and nothing about politics and nothing about kind of the broadest issues that we're all facing and our clients are facing around discrimination and poverty and stuff. And so for me as a practitioner, and my work as a lecturer and as a therapist, that's who I am. But I'm really interested in the politics of therapy and the society of therapy. And social work enables me to do that in a way that therapy in of itself, certainly it's currently constituted, doesn't. I think it's a very apolitical profession, which I think is well, at best ridiculous. Because how can we not engage with the issues that our clients bring through the door? So for me, I don't work as a social worker. I haven't worked as a social worker, although I maintain my registration as a social worker. It brings all the bits together for me, but one itself.
I think that's a really interesting point, Andrea, particularly around the politics of our own politics and almost kind of how we express that and how open we are about all of that. And that fits in with what Louise was saying for me around, do my clients know that I'm a social worker and that I've worked, with children and families and within a legal setting and things like that, and what our clients know about us before they kind of agree to work with us. And I think, Louise, I've had that battle as well, which is, do I need to kind of put on my private practice website that I'm a social worker so people have that, oh, right, okay, you've got that experience, or is it something that they don't really need to know? And I've had that kind of struggle, I suppose, as to what your identity is and what you're kind of telling people about, really. Kieran, what can I come to you? What kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. Andrea, that's really interesting to hear your comments on kind of therapy as an apolitical profession, and I can offer a bit of a different slant on it, because one of our tutors at the Academy Space in Sheffield was very politically motivated in her approach and in her work, and she ran a module. The primary objective of which was for us to really reflect on and understand how we came to be the people we are, what level of intersection we experienced of different disadvantages and advantages in social strata and things like that, and also to really reflect on how much of that do we want to bring to the therapy relationships that we have, to our work roles, and all that. And it was a great module. I'd never been challenged as much or as hard on my kind of self-awareness as I had in that module. And it to this day, it forms an intrinsic part of my practice. Yeah. And it does mean that I do feel like I have a reasonable platform to respond and work with clients who are, having socio-political difficulties of various kinds. Yeah. But just to go back to the original question where this kind of started, was I had my existential crisis of identity shifting from nurse to lecturer. So initially, in the first few years of being a lecturer, I was also an honorary clinician, so I was still going to an operating department and still helping to look after people who were under anaesthetic and recovering from anaesthetics and stuff during surgery. And really felt like I was a nurse. But then my role changed. That wasn't accessible anymore. It wasn't realistic anymore. And I spent a few years kind of struggling with this sense of, I'm on the nursing register, but I'm not doing nursing. I'm not walking the walk anymore. And I just kind of just settled into the idea that, well, I'm a lecturer now. That's what I do. I'm a lecturer in nursing. And yes, it requires me to be on the nursing register and things like that. But kind of just got comfortable with the idea of, it sounds almost trite to say it, but if you are claiming to be something, then you have to do something connected with that being. And I think that's where the later difficulties in work came, that, I wasn't doing things that I kind of valued and respected and really kind of could get behind as a person. Whereas therapy is the exact opposite. In my mind, I absolutely have to be all the things that I am offering the client. The Rogers conditions, the things that I put on my website as my offer. Come to me if you're looking for this type of work. I have to be those things when the client is with me. And like Lynn said, I only feel really comfortable in that, in an independent setting. I do some freelance work as a therapist with groups, agencies and groups that do allow me, a lot of freedom, but it's not complete. Understandably, they have policies, they have missions, and if I'm going to be part of that, then I need to be part of it, and that's fine. But, the absolute freedom is in private practice for me.
It's really interesting, that, Kieran, and it reminds me of what, Lynn, you were talking about before, that idea of moving from that organizational setting into that kind of independent, kind of, you can make your own decisions as an independent practitioner. And I know I work in a university, but I felt that shift when I moved into university. I felt like they allow a lot of independent thinking. It's a thinking institution, isn't it, around how I wanted to be as a practitioner and kind of how I kind of express my professional identity, I suppose. And I think up until that point, I did have some conflicts. Who was I today? Whereas now I feel like I've been able to kind of bring them together a little bit more, maybe, into a bit more of a whole kind of picture or identity, maybe.
Sorry, Lynn, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, when you said that, Peter, it's almost like there's those themes of freedom and control that we try and work with people around, and yet we also explain as employees and how that is balanced.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just wanted to go back to something you said, Kieran, about it's important to kind of be who you are and to be what you offer, which I really, really agree with. And I think in some ways that's why social work and therapy are very important to me, because social work allowed me to be the sort of therapist that I am. Because as a therapist, I was taught to go and sit in a room with somebody sat opposite me, not quite at 45 degrees angle, and to tilt my head slightly and to go in the right places. And to, in some ways, particularly early on, to perform being a therapist, which I really hated. And I didn't get that from being a social worker. So back in the early 90s, I was working with young people who had what we would now call social anxiety. And I wouldn't sit in a room talking about social anxiety. I'd arranged to meet them in a cafe in the middle of town or something. And then we kind of debrief what that was like. And, and we'd go outside, and now we call it outdoor therapy. And, there's something about who I am with my clients is who all of me, and I don't perform being a therapist. And I think that social work really allowed me to be a very kind of grounded, this is who I am sort of person, albeit filtered through obviously the skills and knowledge that you have, rather than pretending to be something. So I put social. on my website, I don't have a big private practice, but I put that I'm a registered social worker, not because I'm offering people social work in that strictest sense, but I'm offering all of me. And I'm really, really proud of it, really proud of the social work that I've done and the therapeutic skills I've been able to acquire from that I'd have never have learned on a therapy course, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I'd agree with that, and I'd also go back to that other point you were making before. I believe that my social work training has embedded in me this idea of thinking about systems and the structural kind of issues that exist. And I think you were kind of mentioning that before. Whereas I do think my therapy training was about the relationship and what was going on in the room, but did probably miss kind of a lot of that other stuff, actually. The person in context, you know, the client in the context of the wider world, I think. Just moving on to our next question. So we've talked about kind of a lot of the challenges of being dual qualified. I was wondering what some of the rewards people might have felt or benefits maybe to our clients or potentially to yourselves as well. What people have experienced kind of the benefits of being qualified in both professions.
I would definitely say that not only have I benefited, one of the reasons why, as I said earlier, I went into trained to be a psychotherapist was because I felt I was doing that role, but without guidance as a teacher. And since I've trained, I've done a lot of work recently with other teachers, as I'm sure some of you are aware. I have a real fight at the moment. I would really like to see the role of supervision to be brought into the teaching profession. Not as a monitoring another agency to watch what we're doing, but to be there. I think that there's been a real shift in teaching where some of your work from social work has been put on educators. And, you know, although I feel that's always been a passion of mine, I'm well aware that there's some of my colleagues who'd be absolutely mortified about taking on that responsibility. So, you know, certainly I feel that there's a lot of work that gets done as a teacher, certainly in a pastoral role, where we give advice freely to young people, but without guidance, and sometimes, certainly on a safeguarding issue daily. I have some colleagues who'll come to me and say, Louise, you know, I've just talked to somebody about suicide and suicide ideation and real risky conversations that are very guided and structured elsewhere, but within a school setting. Obviously there's the guidance from safeguarding. So what I feel it's given me is that yes, like you were saying before, Lynn and Kieran, about the freedoms that counselling and psychotherapy has offered, but also within a structured environment. So I feel like it's given me more empathy for young people. I feel it's given me more experience working with other teachers, understanding where they come from. And generally, I just feel that the benefits of that is I've become a much better teacher because I look beyond why somebody's not doing something now, and I'll have that. You know, I can read body language and, you know, signs that have always been there for the past 29 years for me, but perhaps I'd missed because I was focusing on something else. And you know, certainly I feel there's much scope for that in the future. I feel that certainly in the teaching profession, we're lagging about 10 years behind in some areas, with bringing all our colleagues on board and giving them that expertise that perhaps other caring professions have had, and they've had that input on part of their teacher training courses and their CPD training. So that's something I feel I've benefited from, but I'd like to see that shared on a bigger scale.
It's really interesting, that point about external supervision, Louise. And I once worked as a support worker. This was actually before my counsellor and social work training. I worked as a support worker in a charity, and they offered external supervision with a therapist for all of their employees, where you could go once a month and just talk about the stresses of the job, what was going on for you. They didn't report back to the organisation at all, and it was just purely there for you to access that emotional support. I've never really seen many organisations ever do that since, actually, and certainly not for kind of teachers or social workers and things like that. So I think, and I offer that to some people independently now as a therapist, but I think actually it's something that's massively missing in lots of different professions. Actually, that space, as you say, not managerial supervision, but that separate space to kind of talk about the emotional impact of the job that they're doing.
Yeah, definitely, Peter. I feel, certainly my research for my master's it opened up quite a debate really about the need for reflection, the need to be able to share with somebody quite emotional experiences that you've had in the day. Certainly at the moment, mental health issues in school. There is no space for teachers to be able to say, gosh, I don't know whether I've done that right. And that really kept me awake all night. And certainly in my research, that was something that came across. It was that internalization of teachers taking home with them. Quite graphic, disturbing, and I know I'm talking to a team of social workers who do this on a daily basis or have done this on a daily basis. But I think keeping different caring professions safe and having gone to, so we're talking about benefits, certainly that benefit of going to supervision for me has been a huge eye-opener, where I've got a chance to reflect, to learn, to be able to listen to my supervisor's opinions, and bringing that into the teaching profession for all kinds, whether it's pastoral, whether it's educational. That's a huge chance or an opportunity to allow professional development, to help well-being in teachers, and certainly for that to impact on our young people as well. We can only move forward with that. But sadly, it's not the case, and it's not statutory, and it's something that hopefully in 10 years we might look back and think, gosh, this debate's quite out of date now. But here's hoping. Let's hope some things move forward, and we can take some of the learning curves that psychotherapy have had and bring them into other professions.
Yeah, and there's a huge difference I've noticed in counselling supervision and social work supervision. And the tutor Karen was mentioning, I think, found my experiences of social work supervision when I shared what it was like, very much case management. What are you doing now? Let's make a list of 10 actions. So you would come out of supervision discussing every family, every case, and I don't like that word, but that's what it was. It was case management, and you would have a list of tasks to do, rather than, and I did struggle with social work supervision at the start because I wasn't sure what it was. I struggled with counselling supervision. It didn't follow any blueprint I was used to. What do you mean this is my time to discuss how I feel about this? I'm not used to this. This is new. And it did take me a while to make that shift between the two, and in the employed counselling roles I've had, which have then distinguished line management from supervision, which I think as social work practice could learn a lot from, having a different line manager and a different therapeutic supervisor.
That's really interesting, Lynn, because I naively assume that other professions, it's going to, obviously, I know working in a public domain, you're not going to have it as free and as easy, but certainly when it becomes an additional workload, that's not going to help you in your professional reflection or time or space that it should be for.
I think, Louise, you touched on something really important in terms of what we can offer each other. I mean, I as a therapist, I define myself as pluralistic. So I've had various trainings along the way, and I'm a firm believer that no one model fits all clients. People need different things at different times, and likewise, I think people need different interventions from different types of people. So I've worked alongside teachers who've been able to do things that I, as a social worker, as a therapist, have never been able to do because they have a different sort of relationship, or indeed with nursing staff or community nursing staff or other social work staff. And so I'm not saying in this discussion today, Peter, I think you can only be a decent counsellor if you are dual qualified, because that's obviously nonsense. You know, I think you can be a fantastic counsellor if that's your core and primary qualification. But for me, the benefit is around that pluralism. So, you know, what I do hopefully is therapeutic. And so, you know, I know with a lot of the work I do, I will bring in my knowledge and ideas and thinking as a social worker, and we'll bring that in and offer that to people. And I will bring in all of that from the therapies that I can deliver too. But for me, this is a personal thing. It also gave me enormous confidence in being able to speak to other professional groups, you know, and work with teachers and work with nurses and work with GPs and work with psychologists and work with support workers and work with whoever is best placed at that point to be able to offer something of value to that person. Because again, going back to the politics, you know, if I'm working with somebody in therapy who is living in really crappy accommodation with no money, I really need somebody who's got that advocacy role, or the benefits role, or the social role, to be able to enable that person to move. Because I have a bit of a problem with some of the concepts of resilience. That resilience sits with somebody individually. And so, you know, if I'm black and I'm being subjected to racial abuse every day, should I become more resilient in being able to cope with that, or should I, as a therapist, be able to advocate on behalf of my clients and speak to other groups who might be able to challenge that? So for me, it's the dual role supports that pluralistic positioning that I hold in my practice.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, Andrew. It's that confidence and that shared conversation, and you'll be able to access communities and professional roles that perhaps you might have shied away from doing had you not had that experience. Yeah.
And I think working in a university, seeing so many students come who are already qualified in a profession, and all of that experience that they bring with them, actually being able to use that, like that's a benefit to kind of come in and kind of hold all that knowledge and that skill that they've already kind of developed as part of their therapy practice, I think is really important. Absolutely.
Yeah, for me, my experience and knowledge from having been a nurse and a lecturer in nursing, it's opened up all sorts of conversations with clients around, Andrew, as you said, things like, you know, housing and benefits, and also for me, like things like medication. Whilst I don't prescribe medications, I do feel comfortable having conversations with people about medications and things like side effects, and, you know, recommending you have a chat to your GP about, you know, what you're experiencing with this medicine. You know, just letting people know that they have some agency and power in situations. It is very much a therapeutic role, but you know, for the person their lack of agency or perceived lack of agency is often in relationship to things like healthcare systems, benefit systems, housing systems. Yeah, the things that they're experiencing, like education systems, that kind of create some difficulty or friction or structural problem for them. That we can explore very much in the therapeutic setting. And yeah, for me, when it's health and social care that's on the table, I don't feel like I have to shy away or avoid that conversation. I can engage in it and, you know, make it part of our therapeutic work.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. So we're just coming to the end now. I feel like that time has flown by. It's gone really, really quick. I'm just wondering whether to end on, and I don't know whether we can do this briefly, but just about that idea of whether you feel that we do need to choose between our professions, or whether we can hold both of those dual identities as practitioners. I'm just wondering whether we could have some final thoughts on that.
I think I don't think anybody has to choose by force. I made my choice to go one way and not the other, for very personal reasons. I think professionally it would have been possible to maintain a nursing registration and a nursing practice and be a therapist. and for there to be a bit of an overlap between those two, where each informs the other and becomes part of and parcel of me as a practitioner in both. Yeah,
I agree, Kieran. I certainly think that for your clients or the people you work with in your other role, I think that benefits them. My only comment I would make there, which I'm sure all of us have been through at some point, is the well-being of yourself. And I think at the point where that becomes, and it tips me to the point where I have to choose, that would be my deciding factor. And that's something that it's difficult to manage. Let's all be honest. Remembering the protocols and which role you're actually occupying on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But certainly for the people who work with us, I think that certainly, in my experience, that benefits them, and hopefully at the moment still benefits me. But when it doesn't, I will change.
If you'd asked me this time last year, I'd have said I need to make a choice. So I'm going to say I'm making a choice to do both, and come back to me this time next year and let's see where I sit.
Yeah, and I think that's very similar to me, Lynn. As the years have passed, I've kind of gone that, they've come together and they've moved apart. I mean, I'd answer your question from a micro and a macro perspective. From a micro perspective, from me as an individual, I think it's right as individual practitioners we make the decision that fits where we're at and what feels comfortable. For me, now, I think, and possibly because of the education role I have as well, social work and counselling, it's just a seamless thing. They're not two. I mean, they are two separate roles because one's statutorily regulated and one isn't. But they are seamless in me as a practitioner. If I answer it from a macro perspective, our clients need all of us. Our clients need therapists, really good therapists, and our clients need really good educators, and our clients need really good nurses. And I need educators, and I need nurses, and I need doctors, and I need social workers, and I need these people. So from a macro, we all have to be in the pot, because no one person can fix all of kind of the struggles people have. But for me as an individual, where I am now, they're seamless. For me, counselling is the new social work. It was what I wanted social work to be from when I first went in, that turned out not to quite be that. No, I'm not in child protection now, and no, I'm not doing statutory mental health act assessments kind of stuff. But I'm doing people. I'm working with people, and that's all of it.
Thank you. And I think for me, I agree with all of that. For me, it's been like an evolution, I think, really, from that idea of actually I'm doing two different roles, but somehow I'm trying to evolve that into that me as a practitioner, where all of that kind of comes together. And I don't see myself as a dual identity, but actually just as a practitioner with all that kind of experience behind me. So I think we were all kind of saying that in some way, shape or form at different points. Thank you so much, everybody, for being on this panel. I found that really interesting. I think we could have gone on actually for another hour, actually talking about some of the nuances of all of that. But thank you for coming along, and I really appreciate your time speaking to the panel. And maybe we'll have another one in the future and go into more depth. Thank you, everyone who has been watching. The rest of the Therapist Connect birthday celebration events you can find on our website and see some of the other discussions that we've been having. So thank you, everyone. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.